I still remember the morning light of my 77th birthday. It spilled through the curtains of my small kitchen like golden threads, soft yet piercing. I stood there, staring at the reflection in the kettle's polished steel surface, adjusting the indigo dress with pearl buttons I had chosen so carefully. My hands trembled not from age alone, but from something deeper, an uneasy flutter in my chest that refused to settle. Birthdays, after all, were meant to be moments of celebration. Yet, as I pinned my silver hair into place, I could not shake off the heaviness that clung to me. Perhaps it was loneliness whispering in the quiet corners of the house. Or perhaps it was the way Clara, my daughter-in-law, had suddenly insisted that morning, "Mother, today I'll take you to a better place somewhere permanent." Her words had landed like shards of ice, sharp and unyielding. I forced a smile then, but inside, a chill spread through me, colder than the autumn wind outside. What was promised to be a simple birthday lunch would unravel into something far darker, far heavier, the fiercest battle of my life. My name is Margaret, and I turned 77 on the day this story began to unravel. When people look at me now, they see silver hair, skin softened with lines, and shoulders that bow slightly from years of carrying weight that was not always my own. They may see fragility, but inside me lives the strength of storms weathered, sacrifices made, and love poured out until I was hollow. My life has been a tapestry woven with threads of duty, loyalty, and endurance. I was once a school teacher, the kind who stood patiently in front of chalkboards dusted white and filled with restless children, believing that knowledge could shape the crooked paths of youth into straight ones. I loved books, art, and the idea of travel. Yet my dreams were always set aside, tucked neatly on a shelf as I married, raised children, and built a life around others' needs instead of my own. I married my husband when I was still young, a girl not yet 20. He was a man of modest means, strong hands hardened by labor, but he had eyes that softened when they looked at me. We built a life together in a small house with peeling paint and a porch that creaked under the weight of every visitor. We didn't have much, but there was laughter and there was love. We struggled through winters with thin blankets, summers with no cooling but open windows, and holidays that often consisted of homemade gifts and simple meals. Yet I never resented it. I believed love would always be enough, and for many years it was. Our first child, David, arrived one humid July morning. His cry was so fierce that I laughed through tears, believing my boy would always be strong, always be the kind of man who could conquer the world. I rocked him through sleepless nights, stitched his torn clothes, cheered him through school plays and baseball games, and watched him grow into a tall, confident man. He was my pride, my proof that sacrifice bore fruit. I believed he would always remember the nights I stayed awake so he could dream. But children grow, and the world presses into them with invisible hands. Somewhere along the way, David became a man I barely recognized. At 52, he wears confidence like a mask, yet the voice he speaks with often feels borrowed, shaped by the woman who stands beside him, Clara. Clara entered our family like polished silver on a table set for show. She was graceful, elegant, blonde hair smoothed into a sheet of perfection, clothes pressed sharp, jewelry understated, but undeniably expensive. To outsiders, she appeared like the perfect daughter-in-law, polite and composed, always speaking in measured tones. But I am not easily deceived. Behind her painted smile, I saw calculation. Behind her politeness, I felt judgment. Her eyes, cold and assessing, always moved over me like I was an object taking up space rather than a person to be loved. She was not cruel outright, not in ways others could easily see, but her silences, her carefully phrased remarks, her subtle exclusions spoke louder than outright insults ever could. To her, I was never truly part of her world, only an obligation tied to her husband. Then there is Susan, my only daughter. My heart once believed daughters were forever friends, mirrors reflecting back love and understanding. In her youth, Susan braided my hair, asked for stories at bedtime, and promised never to leave me. But promises given by children are made of glass, and adulthood cracks them. Now she lives only a few streets away, yet the distance between us feels wider than the Pacific Ocean. She visits when she needs something, a favor, money, a babysitter for her children, but rarely just to sit and share a cup of tea. I tell myself she is busy, that modern life devours women whole. But the truth presses heavy. Her heart is turned toward her own world, and I am a footnote. My youngest, Henry, is farthest in miles, yet often closest in spirit. He lives in California, where the air smells of salt and orange blossoms, and where his children run barefoot under palm trees. He calls me twice a year, on my birthday and on Christmas, and though his words are brief, they are sincere. In those few minutes, I feel like I matter again, like I am not fading but still woven into the fabric of someone's life. He has always been my gentle one, the boy who would bring me wildflowers clenched in muddy fists, the boy who cried when his goldfish died because he believed even the smallest lives deserved mourning. I have given all of myself to these three children. My dreams of painting, of traveling, of seeing the world beyond our small town, those dreams were folded away so that they could have shoes, books, and warm meals. My husband worked hard, but there was never enough, so I carried more than my share. I tutored students after hours. I took in mending jobs, and I went without new clothes for years. My body grew tired, but my heart was steadfast. I believed the love I poured into them would return one day in care, in gratitude, in tenderness. But widowhood changed the rhythm of my days. My husband passed more than a decade ago, and with him went the companion who shared my burdens. Since then, the house has grown quieter, the nights longer. Loneliness settles into the walls like dust, and sometimes I speak aloud just to hear the sound of my own voice. Yet, I endure. I water the flowers. I bake bread. I sit by the window and watch seasons change, telling myself that the sacrifices were worth it. On the morning of my 77th birthday, Clara arrived unexpectedly. She stood at my doorway, perfume heavy in the air, smile too smooth. "Just the two of us," she said. "A birthday lunch. A treat." At first, I was surprised. Clara had never shown interest in my company before. Family gatherings were orchestrated by David, and even then, Clara seemed to endure me rather than welcome me. Why now? Why today? Yet, I wanted to believe. Birthdays are fragile things at this age, like delicate glass baubles, and I longed to be seen, to be cared for, even if only for a moment. I dressed carefully, choosing my indigo dress with pearl buttons. As I fastened them, I remembered the years I wore dresses sewn from scraps, the nights I mended clothes by candlelight while children slept. I pinned my silver hair neatly, as though preparing not just for lunch but for the possibility of feeling important again. I stepped outside, the autumn air crisp against my skin, and slid into Clara's sleek black SUV. The leather smelled rich, the perfume overwhelming. "Relax, Margaret," she said, her manicured hands steady on the wheel. "We're going somewhere special." Yet when I caught her eyes in the mirror, they held no warmth. They were sharp, final, as though this outing was not a gift, but a sentence. A voice deep inside me whispered, "Be careful." I sat quietly, smoothing the fabric of my dress, trying to ignore the unease coiling in my stomach. What was meant to be a simple birthday lunch was not that at all. It was the beginning of a journey I never expected to take, one that would test not only my strength, but the very essence of who I was. And though I did not yet know the depth of the storm approaching, I could feel its shadow already stretching across my life. The engine of Clara's SUV purred softly, a sound too smooth, too calculated, as though even the car reflected her carefully polished life. I sat in the passenger seat, my handbag clutched against my lap, fingers tracing the worn leather strap that had traveled with me for years. The streets of my neighborhood slipped past familiar porches with peeling paint, children's bicycles abandoned on lawns, neighbors raking leaves into crisp piles that smelled of autumn. These streets were my map of comfort, each corner holding a memory of laughter or sorrow. But Clara drove past them without pause, her perfume thickening the air until it seemed to choke me. "Where are we going?" I asked lightly, forcing my voice to sound curious rather than fearful. "You'll see," she replied, her eyes fixed forward, lips pressed in a thin line. I tried again. "I thought you mentioned lunch?" Her laugh was low, sharp, as if she were amused by my naivety. "Mother, don't meddle. This isn't your home anymore. You'll be better off where we're taking you." The words hit me with the weight of stone. "This isn't your home anymore." My heart stuttered in my chest. The house where I had raised 3 children, cooked countless meals, and held my husband's hand as he took his final breath. How could it not be my home? I pressed my lips together, choosing silence over reaction, but dread pressed heavily against my chest, each beat of my heart echoing with unease. The city faded behind us as Clara guided the car onto the interstate. The landscape stretched wide fields of gold and russet trees, shedding their autumn coats, skies painted in grays and blues. The hum of the tires on the pavement became a metronome for my thoughts. I wondered if David knew about this. If my son, the boy I had once carried on my hip, the boy who whispered "Mama" into my ear at night, was part of this plan. The thought clawed at me, cutting deeper than Clara's cruelty ever could. I shifted in my seat. "Clara, I should really call David. He'll be wondering where we are." Her hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. "David knows. He agrees this is best." My breath caught. He knows. So it wasn't just her deception, it was his betrayal too. Betrayal from the very child who once promised he would take care of me when I grew old. I turned my face toward the window, blinking rapidly as the world outside blurred. I would not give Clara the satisfaction of seeing my tears. Her phone buzzed on the console, screen lighting up with repeated calls. I glanced quickly and caught the name. Sunset Haven Nursing Facility. My stomach twisted. Sunset Haven. I had heard whispers of it from neighbors. A sterile place far from town, where the elderly were tucked away like forgotten books on a dusty shelf. The kind of place where voices softened into silence, where dignity was exchanged for schedules and pills. "You'll like it there," Clara said suddenly, as if she had read my thoughts. "It's peaceful, clean, a place for women like you, women like me." As if my identity could be reduced to age and frailty. As if all the years of sacrifice, of molding lives, of holding a family together, had been erased by the number of candles on my birthday cake. My hands trembled in my lap, but I steadied them by gripping my phone. With careful movements hidden beneath the folds of my dress, I unlocked the screen. My lawyer's name glowed at the top of my contacts. We had spoken weeks ago, after Clara's veiled comments and David's strange behavior had left me uneasy. He had warned me to be cautious, to prepare, and so I had. With my thumb, I typed a single word: "Now." Then I slid the phone back into my bag, heart pounding. Clara was too distracted by the road to notice. The air in the car grew heavier with every mile. I could hear my own breath, shallow and quick, as though my body was preparing for battle. My mind drifted to Susan. Had Clara confided in her? Would she care, or would she simply shrug, relieved that responsibility had been taken off her shoulders? And Henry, my sweet Henry, so far away, would he find out only when it was too late? I turned to Clara, forcing calm into my voice. "Clara, I'm not ready for a place like that. I'm still able. I cook, I clean, She cut me off with a dismissive flick of her hand. "You're old, Margaret. This isn't about what you think you can do. This is about what's best for everyone. Don't make this harder than it has to be." The words were cold, efficient, as though she were discussing furniture being moved, not a human life. Rage stirred beneath my ribs, hot and pulsing, but I pressed it down. Outward calm was my shield. Inward fire was my strength. The car sped northward, the city vanishing completely, replaced by endless stretches of interstate and signs pointing toward places I had never been. Each mile felt like a thread being cut, severing me from the life I had known. But within that severance, something stirred a spark, a reminder that I was not merely an old woman to be discarded. I was Margaret. I was a mother, a teacher, a woman who had endured more than Clara could imagine. The silence between us thickened, broken only by the occasional buzz of Clara's phone and the steady rhythm of the tires. I folded my hands tightly, breathing slowly, preparing myself. I did not yet know what shape my rescue would take, or how my message would be received, but I knew one thing with certainty. I would not go quietly into the shadows. As the highway stretched endless before us, Clara leaned back, her confidence radiating in every gesture. "This place will be forever," she muttered under her breath, almost as if speaking to herself. Forever. The truth dawned on me fully, then this was no temporary solution, no gentle suggestion. They wanted me gone, erased from their lives, locked away behind walls, where my voice would not reach, where my presence would not interfere. My birthday, meant to celebrate life, had been twisted into a farewell. But what Clara did not know was that I was ready. My lawyer's words echoed in my memory. "When the time comes, Margaret, don't be afraid. Trust me. Trust yourself." I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and let the silence settle around me like armor. For the first time that morning, I felt not just fear but also defiance. Clara believed she was steering me toward an ending. She had no idea that I was preparing for a beginning. The road ahead stretched like a ribbon of gray silk, unraveling mile after mile beneath the tires of Clara's immaculate SUV. Autumn leaves, fierce in their final blaze of crimson and gold, blurred past my window as if the season itself was rushing toward an inevitable conclusion. My fingers clutched my handbag tighter, my knuckles pale beneath thinning skin. I could feel the rhythm of my pulse in my temples, beating out the truth I dared not speak aloud. They were taking me away, far from my home, far from the life I had carved with sacrifice. Clara drove with the precision of someone who believes they are in full control. Her posture was rigid, shoulders square, eyes trained on the highway ahead. She was not nervous. No. Her confidence dripped from every movement, every shallow breath. For her, this drive was not a betrayal, it was a task being executed, a plan carefully set into motion. The betrayal belonged to David. My David. My firstborn, the boy I had carried against my hip while hanging laundry in the wind, the boy whose cheeks I had kissed raw from tears, the boy who once clutched my hand in church and whispered promises of forever. His silence now cut deeper than Clara's cruelty ever could. My heart replayed his words from years past. I remembered the night after his father's funeral, when the house seemed to groan with emptiness. David had sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands folded, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. "Don't worry, Mom," he said. "I'll always look after you." That promise had been the lantern that lit my darkest nights. And yet here I was, in the back seat of his wife's car, being driven away like baggage too cumbersome to keep. Clara's phone buzzed again on the console. The screen glowed with a name that made my stomach clench. Sunset Haven Nursing Facility. Her manicured fingers reached for it, and for a moment, the steering wheel wobbled beneath her grip. She pressed the speakerphone. "Yes?" Her voice was clipped, businesslike. "Mrs. Whitmore," a woman's voice replied, smooth and professional. "We're ready for the intake as soon as you arrive. The room is prepared. Everything is in order." Good. Clara said, her tone carrying satisfaction. "We'll be there shortly." The words slammed into me with brutal clarity. My son's wife had orchestrated every detail, the room, the papers, the betrayal hidden in polished tones. I swallowed hard, pressing my lips together to contain the storm rising inside me. I would not cry. Not yet. I shifted my gaze to the landscape, searching for strength in the world beyond the glass. The fields rolled endlessly, dotted with barns that seemed to bow under the weight of time. Trees lifted bare branches toward the sky, skeletal arms in prayer. My reflection wavered faintly in the glass. A woman lined with years, silver hair pinned neatly, eyes still burning with a fire Clara could not extinguish. I thought of Susan, my only daughter. Would she stand by Clara's side in this? Or would she turn away, relieved to let someone else shoulder responsibility? Susan had grown distant, her visits infrequent, her requests for help frequent. I wanted to believe that if she knew of this scheme, she would protest, would shield me. But the truth whispered otherwise. Silence can be as sharp as betrayal. Henry's face floated into my mind, my youngest, far away in California. His calls were few but warm, each word carrying genuine care. If he knew, he would never allow it. But distance is a cruel barrier. He was 3,000 miles away, too far to catch me as I was pushed toward this abyss. I slid my hand into my bag and brushed the cool surface of my phone. Earlier, I had already sent the word now to my lawyer. He had told me to trust him, to prepare for the day when the shadows would step into the open. My pulse quickened as I replayed his words. "Margaret, when it happens, don't panic. Don't argue. Don't beg. Simply hold your ground. I'll be there." Clara glanced at me briefly, her eyes flicking to my hands. "You're quiet," she remarked, her tone laced with false sweetness. "I'm thinking," I replied softly, my voice steady, despite the tempest within. She smirked faintly. "Thinking won't change what's coming." Her arrogance filled the space between us, thick and suffocating. But I knew something she didn't. Arrogance often blinds the one who carries it. She believed I was powerless, that I was simply an old woman to be tucked away. She didn't see the steel beneath my wrinkles, the quiet defiance stitched into my very being. The miles slipped past. Billboards for fast food chains and gas stations rose and fell like silent witnesses. My body felt tense, every muscle taut with anticipation. Yet deep inside, a spark of hope glowed. I had lived too many years, endured too many storms, to believe this would be my ending. The car veered onto a smaller road, the sign ahead reading Sunset Haven, 2 miles. My breath caught, my chest tightening, as the name loomed larger, bolder, Sunset Haven. A place that sounded gentle, almost poetic. Yet I knew the truth behind its painted doors. It was not haven but exile. Not peace but erasure. "Almost there," Clara said cheerfully, her words dripping with triumph. I forced a smile, small and controlled, the kind of smile that once reassured frightened students. But inside, my resolve hardened. The battle was coming, and I would not surrender. The closer we drew to Sunset Haven, the heavier the air became inside that car. Even the silence between Clara and me seemed to hum with tension, like a violin string pulled too tight, waiting to snap. My palms were damp against the leather strap of my handbag, yet my face remained calm, almost serene, because I had learned long ago that the truest strength sometimes hides beneath stillness. The facility appeared suddenly at the end of a long, winding road lined with skeletal trees. Its building was wide, modern, and sterile, with glass windows that reflected the fading daylight like mirrors. To anyone else, it might have looked like comfort, like order. To me, it looked like the end of freedom. Clara slowed the car, her lips curling in satisfaction as she guided it into the circular driveway. A sign at the entrance read, "Welcome to Sunset Haven, where peace lives forever." The words made bile rise in my throat. Peace, perhaps, for those who wanted to forget, not for those who were forced to be forgotten. She parked and turned to me, her tone falsely gentle. "Now, Margaret, don't make this harder. The staff here are professionals. You'll be cared for, and David won't have to worry so much. This is what's best for everyone. For everyone but me," I thought. My eyes met hers, and for the first time, I let a flicker of defiance show. "You speak of care as if it's a kindness," I whispered. "But what you really mean is control." Her smile faltered, only for a moment, but it was enough. She stepped out briskly, slamming the door harder than necessary. I stayed still, hands folded, waiting. My phone was still tucked deep inside my bag, its message already sent, its weight a lifeline I clung to silently. Through the windshield, I saw figures waiting by the entrance, 2 women in uniforms, their clipboards in hand, faces polite but distant. They weren't greeting me. They were preparing to intake me, to catalog me like an item arriving in storage. Clara waved to them, her heels clicking against the pavement as she walked with a purposeful stride. I inhaled deeply, the autumn air sharp in my lungs, and steadied myself. Seconds stretched into minutes, though in truth only a handful passed. And then it came the sound of sirens, slicing through the evening like trumpets in a battlefield. My heart leapt, my throat tightening as red and blue lights flashed against the glass facade of Sunset Haven. Clara froze mid-step, her body stiff, her face paling as 2 police cars swept into the driveway with commanding authority. She spun around, her composure cracking. What is this?" she stammered, her voice rising higher than usual, betraying the fear beneath her polished exterior. I opened the door slowly, deliberately, as though I had all the time in the world. The officers approached swiftly, their expressions firm but respectful. "Mrs. Margaret Callahan?" one of them asked, his voice steady. "Yes," I replied, my voice calm, almost regal. "Please step out of the vehicle," he said gently, offering a hand. Clara rushed forward, panic spilling into her words. "Wait, you don't understand. She's confused. She has dementia. She doesn't know what she's saying. She doesn't know where she is." The officer's eyes narrowed, unimpressed. "Ma'am, please step aside." I rose to my feet, spine straight, my indigo dress brushing against the cool evening air. For the first time in hours, I felt not like prey but like a queen reclaiming her throne. Clara's words fell flat, desperate, lacking evidence. And then, from the second police car, another figure stepped out. A man in a charcoal suit, his tie loosened slightly, his eyes sharp and steady. "Sean, my lawyer." Relief surged through me as he approached with calm authority, his leather briefcase swinging at his side. He leaned in close, his voice low but firm, meant only for me. "Everything is happening exactly as we prepared, Margaret. You're safe now." Safe. The word filled me with strength. Clara's composure shattered entirely. "This is ridiculous," she cried, her hands trembling. "She's old. She doesn't know what she's doing. David and I, this was a family decision." Sean's voice cut through hers like a blade. "Correction, this was a conspiracy. Mrs. Callahan contacted me weeks ago with concerns about her daughter-in-law's intentions. I advised her to prepare evidence, and she did. Every text, every call, every attempt to coerce her, it's documented." He held up a folder thick with papers, his expression unyielding. Clara's face drained of color. She's lying." The officer turned to her, his voice clipped. "Ma'am, please remain calm. You'll have your chance to explain." I stood taller, my heart steady now, my fear replaced by something fiercer. Resolve. I looked directly at Clara, my voice no longer trembling but strong, steady, sharpened by years of endurance. You thought today was my end, Clara. You thought you could erase me. But you forgot one thing. I am not weak. I am not a burden to be discarded. I am still the woman who raised your husband, who built a life with nothing but love and grit, and I will decide my own life, not you." The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. For the first time since the morning began, Clara had no reply. As the officers led her toward their car, her protests growing weaker, I felt the evening air wash over me like a cleansing tide. I was not being taken away. I was being set free. The sirens faded into the distance as Clara was escorted away, her once perfect posture bent beneath the weight of her own downfall. I stood at the edge of the driveway, the cool evening air brushing against my cheeks, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and distant smoke from someone's fireplace. My indigo dress, chosen so carefully that morning, now felt like armor. I was not a victim anymore. I was a woman who had stood on the precipice of erasure and refused to fall. The police officers treated me with quiet respect, one of them offering a steadying arm as though I were fragile porcelain. But I straightened my spine, waved him off gently, and walked toward Sean with measured steps. Each footfall echoed like punctuation at the end of a long, silent sentence. Sean's face carried both relief and determination. "You did perfectly, Margaret," he said softly, his voice lowering so only I could hear. "Timing was everything, and you were calm." That message now was the spark we needed. I exhaled, the breath I hadn't realized I was holding releasing into the cool night. "I almost believed she would succeed," I admitted. Her confidence was suffocating. And David, my David, he knew. That nearly broke me. Sean nodded, his expression sober. "We'll face David soon enough. But tonight, you need to remember one thing. You are not powerless. You prepared for this. You protected yourself." The words settled into me like warm stones, grounding me. For years I had been told, in subtle ways, that age meant weakness, that growing old was synonymous with fading away. Yet here I was, standing stronger than Clara could ever have imagined. The officers completed their formalities, assuring me they would file the necessary reports. Clara would be held for questioning, and the truth of her scheme would unravel in the days ahead. As they departed, Sean gestured toward his car. "Let me take you home, Margaret. You've had enough for one day." Home. The word tasted bittersweet on my tongue. Was my house still mine? Or had David already begun weaving his claims around it like a spider spinning a web? I followed Sean to his car, sliding into the leather seat, the exhaustion of the day finally pressing down on me. Yet beneath that fatigue lived a current of strength, a current that whispered, "This is not over. This is only the beginning." The following morning, the phone rang. I had barely finished my tea when the shrill sound echoed through the quiet kitchen. My hands trembled as I lifted the receiver, half dreading, half hoping. "Mother," David's voice came, rough and hurried. "Please, you have to understand. Clara, she was only trying to help." Help. The word landed heavy, bitter. I let silence stretch between us, waiting, giving him the chance to fill it with truth. But he stumbled, faltered, searching for excuses in the ruins of his plan. "David," I finally said, my voice steady though my heart ached. "When were you planning to let me decide my own life?" The line went quiet. I could almost hear him breathing, could almost picture him running a hand through his thinning hair, his eyes darting as if searching for words on the walls around him. But none came. "You betrayed me," I continued, my tone sharper now, laced with the pain of decades. "You, my firstborn, the boy I carried through nights of fever, the boy who promised after your father's funeral that you would always look after me. And instead, you agreed to lock me away. For money? For convenience?" "Mother, it's not like that," he protested, but the weakness in his voice betrayed him. Clara said she convinced me it would be easier, that you'd be cared for. Cared for? My laugh was sharp, bitter. Do you think being hidden away in a room with strangers is care? Do you think stripping me of choice is love? He faltered again, and in that silence, I realized the truth. He had no answer, because the answer was shame. Over the next weeks, the battle moved from the driveway of Sunset Haven to courtrooms and offices, a war fought with documents, testimonies, and the steady patience of justice. Clara faced charges attempted coercion, fraud, conspiracy. Her polished mask cracked in public. The coldness of her eyes, now visible to all. David was spared prison but not consequence. He confessed to his role, admitted that greed and persuasion had twisted him into betraying the very woman who had given him life. I sat across from him one afternoon in Sean's office, the air thick with unspoken words. David's shoulders slumped, his once proud posture broken. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "I don't know what came over me." Clara. She made it sound right, like it was the only option. I wanted to believe her. I wanted life to be easier. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them away. "Easier for you," I said softly. "But not for me. You wanted freedom at the cost of my cage." He lowered his head, shame etching lines deeper into his face than time ever had. "I don't expect forgiveness. Not now. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness is a strange thing. It is not a door easily opened, nor is it a gift handed freely. It is a journey, a long road of cracks and healing. I could not give it then, not fully, but I could give him a chance. If you want to repair what you've broken, David, you must change. Words will not be enough. Actions must speak louder." He nodded, his eyes wet, his voice breaking. "I'll try." Meanwhile, Susan remained distant. She neither defended me nor joined against me. Instead, she faded further into her own life, leaving her silence as her answer. That silence wounded, but I no longer had energy to chase after her affection. If she chose absence, then absence she would have. Henry, on the other hand, flew in from California as soon as he learned the truth. He arrived at my door with his daughter Maria, his eyes full of fire, his embrace warm enough to melt the chill that had lingered in my bones since that day in the car. "I should have been here sooner," he said fiercely. "I should have known." I held his face in my hands, my heart swelling. "You are here now, Henry. That is enough." And it was. His presence reminded me that though betrayal may wound, love can still heal. Through it all, I discovered something I had not expected. Resilience can be sharper in age than in youth. For years, I believed my twilight years would be soft, quiet, a gentle fading into the background. But instead, they became a stage for defiance, for reclaiming dignity. I learned that growing old does not mean surrendering the pen that writes your story. It means wielding it with greater care, greater truth. On quiet evenings, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, the house filled not with loneliness, but with the echo of my own strength. I had faced betrayal and cruelty, yet I had not been erased. Clara was gone, her power stripped. David was broken, yet trying to rebuild. Henry stood by me, steady as a lighthouse against stormy seas. Susan, well, her absence was a wound, but one I could carry. Most of all, I had myself, my voice, my choice, my life. The turning point of my story was not the arrival of sirens, nor even Clara's arrest. It was the moment I chose to believe that I was still capable, still worthy, still alive with fire. That choice was mine, and no one, not Clara, not even David, could take it away. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a storm that refused to settle. Every morning, I woke with the weight of truth pressing against my chest, and every night I lay down knowing tomorrow would bring another battle. Yet for the first time in years, I did not feel powerless. The betrayal had cut me. Yes, but it had also carved out a deeper strength within me. I was no longer afraid of confrontation. I was ready to face my enemies, even if those enemies shared my blood. The first showdown came sooner than I expected. David arrived at my house one gray afternoon, his figure slouched as though the shame on his back had bent him. He stood on the porch, shifting nervously, until finally he knocked. I opened the door but did not invite him in. For a moment we stood there, mother and son, divided not by the threshold of a house but by the chasm of betrayal. "Mother," he said softly, his voice trembling, "I need to explain." "There is nothing to explain," I replied, my tone firm but calm. "You made a choice." He rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes darting to the floor. "Clara convinced me it was best. She made it sound like a kindness. She told me you'd be safe, cared for, and that I wouldn't have to worry. I wanted to believe her. I didn't want to fight her. You didn't want to fight for me," I interrupted, my voice cracking. "That's the truth, isn't it?" His eyes filled with tears, but I did not look away. I had seen him cry before, over skinned knees, lost loves, his father's funeral. But these tears were different. They were born of guilt, not grief. "You were my pride, David," I whispered, my throat tight. "The boy I thought would always protect me. But instead, you stood by while she tried to lock me away. Do you know what that felt like? To look at my own child and see betrayal staring back?" He opened his mouth, but words failed him. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. "Go home," I said finally, my voice weary. "Think about the man you've become, and decide if that is who you want to remain." His shoulders sagged, his figure shrinking before my eyes. Without another word, he turned and walked down the steps, leaving me standing in the doorway with tears burning my eyes. The second showdown was public. Clara, out on bail, attempted to salvage her reputation with crocodile tears and twisted narratives. She claimed she was misunderstood, that she had only acted out of concern, that I was frail and incapable. But in court, her lies crumbled under the weight of evidence. Sean presented every text message, every phone call, every receipt that tied her to the plan. I sat there, my hands folded neatly in my lap, while Clara tried to paint me as confused, senile, unfit. Her voice shook with desperation, her polished mask breaking piece by piece. "She doesn't know what she's saying," she insisted to the judge. "She's old. She forgets things. I was only trying to help." The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Callahan, do you have something you'd like to say?" I rose slowly, my indigo dress flowing around me like a banner. My voice, though aged, rang steady and strong. "Your Honor, I am old, yes, but age is not confusion. Wrinkles do not erase memory. Silver hair does not silence a voice. I know exactly what was done to me. I know exactly who betrayed me. And I stand here not as a victim, but as a witness to the truth." The courtroom grew still. Even Clara's protests died on her lips. In that silence, I felt the power of my own words reverberate, not just in the room but within myself. The judge's gavel came down with finality. Clara was found guilty of attempted coercion and fraud. She was sentenced to probation, community service, and the permanent stain of a criminal record. Her polished image shattered, leaving her exposed as the cold schemer she had always been. But the most painful showdown came later, behind closed doors. David returned once more, this time with no excuses, no defenses. He fell to his knees before me, his hands trembling as he clutched mine. "Mother, I've lost everything," he wept. "Clara's gone. My reputation is ruined. I don't know how to fix this." I looked at him, my heart torn between anger and compassion. "You betrayed me, David. You broke the bond between mother and son. I cannot simply forget that." "I know," he whispered. "But I want to change. I want to be better. Tell me what to do." and I'll do it. I withdrew my hands slowly, my voice calm but resolute. This is not about what I tell you. This is about what you choose for yourself. You must decide whether you will remain a man who betrays his own mother, or whether you will rebuild, brick by brick, a life of honor. The choice is yours. But hear me clearly. If you do not change, you will lose me forever. His tears fell onto the floor, silent and heavy. I turned away, not because I did not care, but because I cared too much to watch him crumble. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, the kettle whistling softly, the clock ticking steady. I thought of all three of my children: David, broken by his own weakness; Susan, absent in her silence; Henry, steady and loving, even from afar. I thought of Clara, stripped of her mask, her power gone. And I thought of myself, a woman who had faced the fiercest battle of her life and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. I poured my tea, the steam rising like a benediction, and whispered into the quiet, I am still here. I am still me. The days that followed the trial were filled with an eerie stillness, as though life itself was pausing to catch its breath. My house seemed quieter than ever, yet the silence no longer carried the weight of defeat. It was the silence of a storm past, the kind that leaves broken branches scattered across the yard, but also clears the air so completely that you can finally see the stars. I spent my mornings tending to the garden, hands deep in the soil, feeling life pulse beneath my fingertips. Each seed I planted felt like a declaration. I am still capable. I am still in control. Yet even in the peace of these small tasks, I knew the hardest battle was not yet over. Confronting Clara in court had been necessary. Confronting David had been painful. But the deepest conflict lived within my own heart: how to reconcile the woman who had endured betrayal with the mother who still longed for her son's redemption. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, a knock came at my door. When I opened it, Susan stood there, her expression tight, her arms crossed over her chest. It startled me to see her, for she had kept her distance through all the chaos. "Mother," she said bluntly, "I don't know why you made such a spectacle of this. You could have handled it privately. Did you have to drag our family's name through the mud?" Her words struck like a slap, but I stood firm. "A spectacle," I repeated softly. "Susan, they tried to erase me. They planned to strip me of my freedom, my dignity. If I had stayed silent, I would already be locked away in that place. Forgotten. Sometimes truth must be shouted, even if it embarrasses those who would rather hide it." She shifted uneasily, her gaze faltering for a moment before hardening again. "I just don't want people looking at us differently. It's humiliating." I inhaled deeply, letting her words sink in before responding. "Do you know what humiliation feels like, Susan? It feels like sitting in the passenger seat of a car, being told your home is no longer yours. It feels like realizing your children, the very ones you sacrificed everything for, see you as a burden instead of a blessing. That is humiliation, and I will never accept it quietly again." Her lips parted, as though to reply, but no words came. She turned abruptly, muttering something about being late, and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away, my heart heavy. Some wounds heal with confrontation. Others remain open, their healing dependent on choices I cannot make for them. A week later, Henry arrived once more, his presence filling the house with warmth and laughter. His daughter Maria bounded through the rooms with the energy only youth can bring, her giggles echoing against the walls that had grown used to silence. "Mom," Henry said one evening as we sat on the porch, "I've been thinking, you shouldn't stay here alone. Why don't you come live near us in California? There's a cottage just a few streets away from my place. You'd have the grandkids close, sunshine year-round, and a community that would welcome you." The offer touched me deeply. My heart ached at the thought of leaving the house where I had lived for decades, where every corner whispered memories of my husband and children. Yet I knew Henry was right. This place had become haunted by betrayal. Perhaps it was time to carve out a new chapter, one written not in survival but in joy. "I'll think about it," I said softly, though already my decision was forming. The final showdown with David came on a quiet Sunday. He arrived unannounced, his face weary, his hands trembling as he held a letter. He placed it on the table before me, his eyes avoiding mine. "I've started therapy," he said simply. This is the first step. I don't expect you to forgive me today, but I want to earn it. I want to be better than the man I became." I picked up the letter, its pages filled with his handwriting, shaky but sincere. In it, he recounted memories from his childhood nights when I stayed awake through his fevers, days when I clapped the loudest at his games, moments when I reminded him he could be anything. He wrote of shame, of regret, of the fear that he had lost me forever. Tears blurred my vision as I read, but I held them back until the end. Setting the letter down, I looked at him long and hard. "David, you broke something that cannot be mended with a single letter. But if you truly want redemption, if you truly want to honor the mother who raised you, then let your actions prove it. Be the son I know you can be. And maybe, someday, forgiveness will find us both." His tears flowed freely then, his shoulders shaking as though the weight he carried was finally being released. For the first time in months, I saw not just the man who betrayed me, but the boy I once cradled, lost and searching for a way home. That night, as I sat with the letter in my lap, I realized the climax of my story was not the arrest, nor the courtroom, nor even Clara's downfall. The climax was this: reclaiming my voice, my dignity, and demanding change from those who had forgotten my worth. The greatest battle was not against Clara, it was against the silence that so often swallows women of my age. And in breaking that silence, I had won. I closed my eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of my own breath, and whispered into the quiet, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." 3 months passed, and with them came a transformation I had never thought possible. The Margaret, who had once stood trembling in the passenger seat of Clara's SUV, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her future. The court proceedings were finished. Clara's conviction had stripped her of the polished mask she had worn for so long, and David's confession had left him raw and broken. I had chosen not to linger in the ruins of what had been done to me, but instead to step into the light of what could still be built. Henry's offer had lingered in my thoughts for weeks. Each time I walked through the rooms of my old house, I heard echoes of laughter and sorrow, shadows of my husband's voice, the patter of little feet that had long since grown into adult strides. But along with those memories lived the specter of betrayal, a ghost that haunted every corner. I knew then that if I was to live fully again, I needed more than survival. I needed renewal. So I said yes to Henry's invitation. The move to California felt like stepping into a new chapter written in brighter ink. The cottage Henry found for me was small but perfect. A whitewashed home with wide windows that welcomed the sunlight. A garden stretched behind it, waiting for seeds, and a front porch overlooked a street, lined with jacaranda trees that burst into purple bloom. It was close enough to Henry's house that his children could run over in minutes, yet far enough that I could keep my own space, my own independence. That balance, the nearness of love, the preservation of autonomy, was exactly what I needed. The mornings there were different. I would wake to the sound of birds, the air filled with the scent of orange blossoms carried in from the groves nearby. I brewed tea and sat on the porch, watching neighbors wave as they walked dogs or pushed strollers. Deborah, a kind woman who lived next door, often joined me. She was a widow too, and together we shared stories of loss, laughter, and the strange resilience that comes with age. With her, I did not feel like a burden. I felt like a friend. The greatest joy, however, was the presence of my grandchildren. Maria would bound into the yard after school, her backpack bouncing, her voice carrying a melody of youth. Her younger brother, Nolan, loved to race through the garden, his laughter a bright thread weaving through the days. Sometimes he would crawl into my lap with a picture book, and as I read aloud, I felt the circle of life complete itself. Once, I had read stories to his father. Now, I was the voice guiding another generation. In those moments, I realized that while betrayal had wounded me, love still had the power to heal. Henry visited daily, bringing with him his calm strength, his easy laughter, and his unwavering loyalty. He never pushed me to talk about the past unless I wished to. He understood that sometimes healing comes not from dissecting wounds, but from planting flowers over them. Together, we rebuilt what had been fractured by distance. And I found in him not just a son, but a partner in this final season of my life. David, meanwhile, began his journey toward redemption. He entered therapy as promised, writing letters to me regularly. In them, he recounted memories from childhood, apologized for each betrayal, and promised to change. Some letters I answered, others I simply held against my chest, allowing the sincerity of his words to soak into the cracks of my heart. Forgiveness was not instant, nor was it complete. But slowly, like the tide-eroding stone, his efforts began to soften the hardness within me. One day, perhaps, I would look at him and see not the man who betrayed me, but the boy I once cradled. That was the hope I carried. Susan drifted further into her silence. She rarely called, rarely visited, and when she did, her words were clipped, distant. I no longer chased her affection. I had learned that love cannot be forced, that some bonds fray no matter how tightly we grip them. It hurt, yes, but in choosing not to beg for her attention, I found a freedom I had not known before. I could cherish what was present without mourning endlessly what was absent. And Clara, well, Clara was gone. She served her probation quietly, her reputation shattered, her influence over David dissolved. I thought of her sometimes, not with hatred, but with a strange pity. She had believed that control was the path to security, that cruelty was a form of power. But in the end, it was her own heart that was imprisoned. I prayed she would one day find a way to live with honesty, though I doubted she would ever return to my life. The greatest resolution, however, was not about them. It was about me. For the first time in decades, I was living a life that belonged wholly to myself. I planted roses and lavender in my garden, their blooms a riot of color against the California sun. I adopted a cat, an orange tabby with mischievous eyes, whom I named Oliver, and his presence filled the house with warmth. I joined a small book club at the local library, where women of all ages gathered to discuss stories and share their own. I was no longer invisible. I was alive, seen, and valued. One evening, as I sat on my porch with Deborah, sipping tea while Nolan played at our feet, I felt a deep peace settle over me. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, and a soft breeze carried the laughter of neighbors down the street. I stroked Oliver's fur, his purr vibrating against my hand, and smiled. At last, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "This is truly my life." The battles, the betrayals, the tears, they had led me here, to this moment of quiet triumph. I had faced the fiercest storm of my years and emerged not as a shadow of who I had been, but as a fuller, stronger version of myself. Age had not diminished me. It had refined me, like fire refining gold. When I look back on the path that led me here, I see more than betrayal and pain. I see strength. I see the quiet endurance of a mother who refused to be silenced. My story is not simply about a daughter-in-law's cruelty or a son's weakness. It is about the truth that every human being, no matter their age, deserves dignity, respect, and the right to choose their own life. Growing older does not mean surrendering your voice. Wrinkles do not erase wisdom. Silver hair does not strip away the right to be heard. For too long, society has whispered that aging turns people into burdens, that mothers become inconveniences to be managed, instead of treasures to be honored. But I stand here as living proof that a mother is not an inheritance to be divided, nor a weight to be carried. A mother is a story, a pillar, a well of sacrifices that built the very lives now judging her worth. If there is one lesson I wish to leave behind, it is this: love is not control. Love is not convenience. True love means respect. It means listening even when it is uncomfortable, honoring even when it is difficult, and standing beside one another not out of duty, but out of devotion. When families forget this, they unravel. But when they remember, they become unbreakable. To those watching, perhaps you see yourself in me. Perhaps you are a mother, growing older, wondering if your years of sacrifice have been forgotten. Or perhaps you are a son or daughter, struggling between your own life and the woman who gave you hers. Wherever you stand, I ask you this: do not let love become silence. Do not let convenience become cruelty. And never, ever let fear dictate the destiny of someone who still has a voice, a heart, and a will to live. My journey has been painful, but it has also been healing. It has reminded me, and I hope it reminds you, that resilience lives in all of us, no matter the season of life. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the strength of mothers everywhere, then please support this channel. Like, share, and subscribe so that these stories of resilience, dignity, and unwavering love can continue to shine a light in a world that sometimes forgets, because every mother's voice deserves to be heard.